The Browns just shocked the NFL world by requesting an interview with 30-year-old Grant Udinski for their head coaching job. And the massive contract they're preparing to offer is all about committing the next decade to Shedeur Sanders. Jordan Schultz broke the news that Cleveland wants this Jaguars offensive coordinator who has very little experience and who the media is calling a boy child of the future. But here's why this controversial move makes perfect sense. Andrew Berry, who became the youngest GM in NFL history at 34, is betting that a young, hungry offensive coordinator who worked with Trevor Lawrence and Sam Darnold is exactly what Shedeur needs. Not some established coach with outdated schemes, but someone young enough to grow with Shedeur over the next 10 years. The massive contract, it's designed to lock Udinski in for the long haul so he doesn't jump ship after 2 years. This is the most unconventional coaching hire the Browns could make, and it's all for Shedeur's future. Brown. I mean, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind when I think about Grant. I mean, he's unbelievable teammate. And he's got all the great qualities of leadership and as a coach that you would want to be around. The best part about camp is I only had to pay him $50 for that answer. No, that's the truth, man. That's the truth. No, this guy's unbelievable. He's the best. I'm so thankful to have this guy here. You want to talk about all the things you look for in a coach. Look, when Jordan Schultz reports that the Browns have requested to interview a 30-year-old coordinator for their head coaching job, your first reaction should be, this is insane. And you'd be right. It is insane. 30 years old is basically unheard of for an NFL head coaching position. But here's where everyone's missing the point. This isn't about Grant Udinski's resume. This isn't about whether he's ready for the job by traditional standards. This is about Andrew Berry making a calculated bet on the future of Shedeur Sanders. The Cleveland radio hosts broke this down perfectly when they said this franchise, if anybody is going to give it a chance to a young guy, it is somebody like Andrew Berry. Andrew Berry, when he was named the GM, is the youngest GM in NFL history at 34 years old. Stop right there. Andrew Berry was 34 when he became GM. That was considered crazy young. People said he wasn't ready. People said he hadn't earned it. People said it was a mistake. And you know what Andrew Berry learned from that experience? He learned that age doesn't matter as much as vision. He learned that being young can actually be an advantage if you're willing to think differently than everyone else. So when Andrew Berry looks at Grant Udinski, a 30-year-old offensive coordinator who's worked with both Trevor Lawrence and Sam Darnold, he's not seeing inexperience, he's seeing opportunity. The radio analyst laid out the logic perfectly. People that get jobs at a young age that they shouldn't have, or what doesn't typically get, are always the ones most likely. If the Browns hire a 55-year-old established coach, what happens? That coach has maybe 5 to 7 years left before he retires or moves on. You get one contract cycle with that coach, and if it doesn't work out immediately, you're starting over. But if you hire Grant Udinski at 30 years old, you're getting a coach who can grow with Shedeur for the next 10 to 15 years. You're getting someone whose career trajectory is tied directly to Shedeur's success. You're getting someone who's going to be patient with development because his own development is happening at the same time. The radio hosts discussed exactly this when talking about why Andrew Berry would take this gamble. One of them said, "Can I just struggle with whether it's Dan Pitcher or Grant Udinski? Like, I know you look at Mike McDaniel and there were warts there, right? It wasn't perfect in Miami. But then came the key insight. You do know good from bad what these guys have done. That's the difference. With established coaches like Mike McDaniel, you have a full track record. You know exactly what you're getting, the good and the bad. With Grant Udinski, you're betting on potential. You're betting on the idea that working with Trevor Lawrence and Sam Darnold has taught him how to develop young quarterbacks. You're betting that his offensive philosophy is modern enough to maximize Shedeur's skill set. And most importantly, you're betting that by offering him a massive contract now, when he's young and unproven, you can lock him in for years before he becomes the hot commodity that everyone wants. Because here's what nobody's talking about. If Grant Udinski is successful in Cleveland, he's not going anywhere for a decade. Why would he? He'll be getting paid head coach money, he'll have complete control over offensive philosophy, he'll have a young franchise quarterback to build around. But if you wait and hire him after he's proven himself somewhere else, then you're competing with every other team. Then he's got leverage. Then he can make demands like John Harbaugh's making. Total roster control, picking his own GM, massive salary. Andrew Berry is getting ahead of the market. He's identifying talent. Jaguars OC Grant Udinski for their head coaching job. He's 30 years old today. He's worked with Liam Coen and Trevor Lawrence this season, and with Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold last year. This guy has very little experience as a coordinator, but he is one of the names that, again, the media masses has anointed as boy child of the future. You're right, man. His name popped up so many times over the weekend, it felt like it just kept coming up over and over and over. 30 years old is insane to be a head coach. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. The radio hosts brought up a legitimate concern when they talked about the media hype around young coaches. One of them said, "I read this long-form piece about Grant Udinski, and it's like he's a communicator, and he's this, and he played with people's kids, and he did this, and it's like none of this actually matters to whether I think he can be a good head coach or not." He went on, "Until you slide that ass in over the old Hugh Jacksonism, you don't know." That's fair. You don't know if someone can be a head coach until they actually do it. All the media puff pieces about being a communicator or having leadership qualities don't mean anything until you're actually making fourth-quarter decisions in a close game. But here's the counter-argument. You don't know if anyone can be a head coach until they do it. Kevin Stefanski had a resume, he had experience, he had a Coach of the Year award, and he still got fired after going 8-26 over 2 years. So if experience doesn't guarantee success, why not take a chance on someone young who fits exactly what you need? And what the Browns need is an offensive-minded coach who can develop Shedeur Sanders, not a defensive coach trying to figure out the offensive side, not a CEO type delegating everything, an actual offensive coordinator who's going to design plays specifically for Shedeur's strengths. The radio hosts made this point beautifully when discussing why they lean toward offensive coaches. One said, "That's why I just lean toward the idea that they're going to end up going with an offensive mind. If it's not McDaniel, I like the idea that Dan Pitcher just keeps getting more and more esteem with each passing day." Then he added, "You keep Schwartz intact, and then you get this guy that you think is the next McVay, and you slide him in." The next McVay. That's the bet Andrew Berry is making with Grant Udinski. He's betting that this 30-year-old coordinator is the next Sean McVay, someone who was young and unproven when he got hired, but turned into a Super Bowl-winning coach.
You want to be the guy that hires Sean McVay before he's Sean McVay. That is a massive. You get to keep your job for a very long time. And if it doesn't work out, well, then obviously you want to have a job, which you might not have anyway after a year. That's the boomer mentality the analyst was describing. You're either going boom, massive success that saves your career, or you're getting fired anyway, so it doesn't matter. And for Shedeur Sanders, this approach is actually perfect because it means the entire organization is aligned around his development. The GM's job depends on it. The coach's job depends on it. Everyone's incentivized to make Shedeur successful. Compare that to hiring an established coach who's got other options. An established coach can always blame the roster, blame the GM, blame the ownership. If things go wrong, they've got built-in excuses and they'll just move on to the next job. But Grant Udinski, if he fails in Cleveland, he's not getting another head coaching job anytime soon. His entire career is riding on making this work. That's exactly the kind of coach you want when you're developing a young quarterback. Do you think Mike McDaniel is a downgrade from Kevin Stefanski? No, I don't understand the people that think it is. I don't even understand the people. I think it's lateral. I think it's you're on the same plane. Let's put it that way. I think it is they are not the same person. But as far as qualifications are concerned, I think McDaniel's a better play caller than Stefanski is. I think McDaniel did more with a quarterback that people think is awful than Stefanski could ever dream of. Now let's talk about what Grant Udinski actually brings to the table. The radio hosts mentioned he's worked with Trevor Lawrence this season and Sam Darnold last year. Trevor Lawrence, a former #1 overall pick who's had his ups and downs but showed improvement this season. Sam Darnold, a reclamation project who actually had a renaissance year in Minnesota. So Udinski has experience with both types of situations, developing a high-pedigree young quarterback, Lawrence, and resurrecting a career that was falling apart, Darnold. You know who that experience is perfect for? Shedeur Sanders, because Shedeur is both a high-pedigree quarterback who needs development and a guy whose career trajectory has been questioned because of where he was drafted and the criticism he's faced. Udinski knows how to work with quarterbacks in both those situations. That's not nothing. That's actually exactly the resume you'd want for coaching Shedeur. But the radio hosts did make fun of Udinski's appearance, which is worth addressing because it speaks to a deeper issue about how young coaches are perceived. They joked that he looks like fifth-generation Kennedy or like he has trust fund money based on his hair gel and clean-shaven look. One even said he has a punchable face. And you know what? That matters, because NFL culture is old school. It values guys who look like stereotypical football coaches, gruff, serious, intimidating. Grant Udinski doesn't look like that. He looks like a finance bro who accidentally wandered into an NFL facility. And for a lot of football people, that's going to be a problem. But for Andrew Berry, a young GM who also doesn't fit the traditional mold, that's probably not a concern. In fact, it might even be a selling point, because if you want to change the culture, you need someone who doesn't look or act like everyone else. Here I am talking into the idea that I think McDaniel's a better coach than Stefanski, but I think so much higher of McDaniel than most people, but I don't think most people think it is, but I definitely do. Yeah, I think Chris Grier made a lot of roster choices. I don't think he was an idiot, but I think he made a lot of roster decisions that were just as, I just want to be mean, just as baffling as what Andrew Berry's done. And yet Mike McDaniel's floor in Miami was 7 wins.
I don't think we liked to. The more he got injured, the more concussions he had. The radio host made an interesting comparison to Mike McDaniel when discussing this. There's a reason why a lot of people don't like him, and it's because he's not very coach-like, for lack of a better term. He doesn't do things the way that most coaches do. He wears expensive watches, he has capris, he vapes, he does all these different type of things. And then the punchline, you just think that's somebody that should be like a run game coordinator, not somebody that should be a head coach. And I think it turns a lot of football people off. But you know what Mike McDaniel did with Tua Tagovailoa? He took a quarterback everyone had written off and turned him into an MVP candidate for 2 straight seasons. The play calling was creative, the offense was explosive, the results spoke for themselves. If Grant Udinski can do even half of what McDaniel did with Tua, imagine what he could do with Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback with better arm talent, better pocket presence, and better decision-making. That's the bet Andrew Berry is making, and the massive contract he's preparing to offer Udinski, that's designed to make sure this partnership lasts long enough to see it through. Because here's the reality, if you hire Grant Udinski on the modest contract and he succeeds with Shedeur in year 1, every other team in the league is going to come calling. They're going to offer him more money, more control, better situations. But if you lock him up now with a massive long-term deal, then he's staying in Cleveland regardless of what other opportunities come up. His financial security is guaranteed, his career trajectory is tied to Shedeur's development, he's got no reason to leave. That's smart organizational planning. That's thinking 5 years ahead instead of just focusing on next season. And that's why this Grant Udinski hire, as unconventional and risky as it seems, might actually be the smartest move the Browns could make for Shedeur Sanders. So here's my question for you. Would you rather have a 55-year-old established coach with a proven track record but only 5 years left before retirement, or would you rather have a 30-year-old offensive coordinator who can grow alongside Shedeur for the next decade? If you want to stay locked in on every development in the Browns coaching search and how it impacts Shedeur Sanders' future, hit that subscribe button right now. We're breaking down the unconventional moves that everyone else is calling crazy, but might actually be genius. Drop a comment and let me know. Is hiring a 30-year-old head coach the boldest move Cleveland could make, or is Andrew Berry setting himself up for disaster? Let's talk about it.